Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov. Monday, June the 8th, 2026. Well, dear friends, it is always with great joy that I find you again, all the more since I have not had the occasion to speak in a general way for some time now. Allow me first of all to offer you all my blessings and all my love, and to settle all of us together into silence before I begin to deliver a few words to you. Silence. Since I last spoke, I believe that, wherever you may be on this earth, what is unfolding on the stage of the world calls for no particular comment. You are all able to observe a certain form of progression, if I may say, of unreason, of illogic, and, as I have already expressed, a form of nightmare. I will simply say a few words about this before dwelling more substantially on what is unfolding within you during this period. You are, quite obviously, in the period of the nightmare, in the period, as Bernard de Montreal put it, of the revelation of the planetary lie and the cosmic lie. I would like to add a few words in a very general way about this, not about the events of the world, which speak for themselves, but above all about your positioning, if I may say, in relation to this world that you can observe within yourselves, and, quite obviously, for each brother and sister as well. Those among you who still have, I would say, beliefs, and in particular beliefs both societal and familial, whether with your husband, with your spouse, with your family, and above all for those who still hold, I would say, religious beliefs in the strict sense, you can observe that certain egregores are at work in an extremely powerful way, such that all these brothers and sisters who still hold beliefs in some fragment of this world, whether at the societal, familial, or emotional level, as I have said, or within the religions, will find themselves, and already find themselves, confronted with the limit of these beliefs, and I would even say with the illusion of these beliefs. For many years we have called you to agape and, of course, to silence. As you can see in every sphere of society, the lie is omnipresent, whether simply in communication, in the religious spheres, in the political and financial spheres, and of course in the fashionable domains, and in particular that of artificial intelligence, which is literally invading you, as the internet did many years ago now. The dynamic is somewhat different today, but it always amounts to the same thing, whatever the domain you look at. You believe in something, and that belief leads you to observe the illusion of that belief, whether religious, societal, familial, and on other levels of course. I am not even speaking of the cosmic lie, but simply at the planetary level. You observe, and you will observe if you have not yet, that everything you can believe in literally holds you in one way or another, and can no longer hold up before the real, before the natural state. And of course this brings resistances, difficulties, sometimes even at the level of the simple belief in your body. As you know, you are in this body but you are not this body. Many speakers insisted on this more than 14 years ago now. Because obviously, if you are identified with the body, if you believe in your body as something eternal, you will of course be confronted with the illusion of that reverie, of that deception. If you even believe in consciousness as an end in itself, there too you will find yourself facing a wall. If you believe in a story, whether the one told to you by the media, by your emotions, by your screens, there too you will find yourself confronted with a wall. There is here, remember, no punishment, but rather what I would call an injunction from the real to turn toward silence. Language, words, have strictly no importance any longer. And as long as you do not lucidly understand that you have nothing to believe, nothing to project, and nothing to await, not even the collective event whose date no one knows, then you will observe, or you do observe, that you are not free in relation to that belief or to your own history. Only silence, and no longer even nature. For many years I had explained that immersion in nature, in the forest, where there is no human or electromagnetic pollution, was extremely important, but that too was not to be made into a belief or a mere experience. And today you will all observe that outside of silence, outside of acceptance, there can be no total access to the real. But this is not a punishment. It is what you have, as I have always said, to pass through, to absorb, to digest in order to live, and I know that some of you already live it, of course, to reach the great silence, the white paradise, joy, agape. But this is within. And above all, it depends on no external circumstance, whether your body, your family, your health, your screens, the words you yourself pronounce, or the words you hear. Even mine, today, are very relative in relation to the real, in relation to what you are in reality, which will not disappear, which will never disappear, and which in fact has never disappeared. Everything that is external is a distraction, a diversion, today more than ever, whatever your obligations, at whatever level. I have always said that you cannot reject your obligations, I have always said that you cannot refuse the here and now. But in your own history of the completion, if I may say, of history, you are all confronted, collectively, individually, and not only you who are incarnate, but all the dimensions as well, with the dream of creation, which must be seen, understood, digested, integrated, in order to recover what is prior to the Alpha and the Omega. I have also said that the Alpha and the Omega meet in the present moment, here and now upon this earth, for the whole of creation. You have no external solution, and obviously, as the unveiling of the planetary and cosmic light progresses, you will live for yourselves that the one and only solution is to make silence in order to live acceptance, even of what you do not understand, and above all of what you do not understand and do not accept. The ultimate key to the myth of creation, as our dear Biddy would say, is exactly at this level and nowhere else. Your so-called personal circumstances, in whatever sector of your personal life or your personal history, will very soon leave you no doubt as to the key of the solution, that which has always been there and which was waiting for you finally to recognize it. There is nothing to refuse. There is everything to pass through. This does not mean remaining motionless like a fool, but simply to turn toward yourselves, beyond questionings, beyond incomprehensions, and even beyond doubts. For it is thus that you come to no longer resist the real. Every problem, ultimately, is only a resistance to the natural state, to Parabrahman as Biddy would say, or to the Absolute. Because it is harder to understand, and this is also the case in other dimensions. It is to accept that there is nothing to do in order to be, that there is nothing to undertake in order to find oneself again, to remember. The moment when you can say I remember is not, of course, the end of personal problems or of your personal history. But it is truly a deconditioning from the last beliefs, the last lies that you tell yourselves, and that some of us, in other dimensions, also tell ourselves. I remind you that in the Absolute there is neither time, nor space, nor history, nor beginning, nor end. The Alpha and the Omega, the past and the future, meet here, in the middle of your chest, at the heart of the heart, beyond all idea, beyond all thought, but also beyond all vibration as well as all understanding. That is surrender to the real. That is remembering what you are. You cannot lean upon a feeling. You cannot lean upon your history, past or to come. You cannot lean upon your body. Let your body live. Of course, this does not mean, once again, and I make this clear again, that you have no need to act, but above all you must no longer react to circumstances, to what society shows you, to what your own human condition shows you, in order to recover the fact that you were never born, that you never appeared, and therefore that you will never disappear. Of course, I have also not hidden from you that many events were going to occur. I have spoken of it for 2 or 3 years now. But the acuteness of external events, as of the inner events in your consciousness, in your body, in your life, in your history, in your projections, are only elements to pass through, to reabsorb, as we used to say in the time of the manifestation of Agape. Remember that everything that has appeared will disappear. But this is not an end. It is a recognition that time, space, individuality, history, yours since your birth, and yours across all your incarnations here and elsewhere, were only the same dream, the same illusion, the same projection. It is no longer the time to project anything whatsoever. Of course, you must assume the dream. And you must, of course, still respect what your consciousness shows you, your obligations, but with an ever greater form of detachment from the result of your actions or from the result of your consciousness itself. It is thus that you will find what you have always been, source of joy, source of peace, source of light, and source of love, of course. But these elements I have just named, peace, joy, love, light, are still only interfaces, because you come, and we all come, beyond creation, from the same natural state, the same transcendent state one might say, which has been named in different ways according to the traditions, according to where one looks. But this natural state, this real state, this Shanti Nilaya, this Sahaja as the Buddhists say, has strictly nothing to do with the conditions of the world, with the conditions of your life, with the conditions of your history. That is perhaps what is still unacceptable to you, and what must be seen lucidly, without any judgment, without any expectation, and above all, without any projection of anything whatsoever. It is the fluidity of unity, as the Archangel Anael said a very long time ago. It is by making use of your body through the breath, through stillness, but above all through acceptance and silence, that you will remember, if you have not already, what you are in truth, and not what you believe. Remember that if you still believe in something, even in the events that are unfolding, such as the stasis, Nibiru, you make of it a projection that draws you away from Hiket Nunc, that is to say, from the present moment, where there is nothing to await, nothing to dread, nothing to hope for, and nothing to project. The circumstances of your personal history, at this precise moment of your incarnate life, are able to bring you precisely to that point. It is more than acceptance, even of what is unacceptable. It is a total resilience and an absence of resistance. The question you may ask yourself, humbly and lucidly, is this: what am I resisting, such that I am not in the I remember, in Shanti Nilaya, in the Sahaja, in the natural state? Because necessarily there is resistance today, if you do not live it. Do not make of it a guilt. Do not make of it an effort. Do not make of it something to be conquered. It is something to be allowed to emerge. In the scientific fields there is much talk, you may hear it, of emergence. What emerges is not transhumanism. It is not consciousness. What emerges is that which is prior to consciousness, there where there is no story to believe, to tell oneself, to project. If you are sincere, if you are in humility, if you are truly in acceptance, nothing can prevent this from being lived and manifested. Remember that it is not in your history, not in society, not in your family, not even in your beloved husband, that you will recover the truth of what you are, but solely in silence. Silence and acceptance are the door that allows you to let what you are be traversed, to not freeze, to be available. A few months ago I told you that you needed time for yourselves, perhaps to go into nature, perhaps precisely to escape these beliefs, this that resists, these conditionings. Today it is even simpler. Even if it may appear extremely complicated to you, in fact it is exactly the opposite. It is of a childlike simplicity that asks for the simplicity of childhood, the humility to accept it, the clarity to accept it, and above all, lucidity. It is no longer the access to the supermental. It is no longer a question of speaking of energy that descends, that rises, or of projecting oneself into visions or mystical states. You will find yourselves again in your simplest humanity, that is to say, in your everyday life, and absolutely not on a screen, absolutely not in a religion, absolutely not in a projection of consciousness or an expectation of anything whatsoever. Of course, we have spoken for a very long time of the stasis, of the white paradise, of immersion within a particular field linked to Nibiru, which is not a chant to be chanted but a field, an electromagnetic one, which brings you back to time zero, here, and now, to the center of the heart, to the center of the real, to the center of joy, and of course, so that you remember that you are prior to all consciousness, so that the myth of individuality, the myth of creation, the myth of a savior, the myth of a transformation, the very myth of a resolution, no longer encumbers your mind in your daily life. Do what you have to do with humility, with lucidity, but above all become aware of what may remain in you of beliefs, of dreams, of illusions, of projections, and also of expectations. Do not be in expectation, do not be in despair, do not be in hope, simply be here and now, awaiting nothing, asking for nothing, just being there, available, whether in a suffering body, whether in a familial, financial, or other difficult situation. It is not a punishment, it is a resolution, provided of course that you accept it. I have often, very often, spoken of the acceptance of what is, just as it is. The chaos of the world is real, perhaps it is chaos in your life too, or perhaps you are in joy. It is of no importance whatsoever, because the real is just behind that, or after that. There is no need for concept, no need for energy, no need for vibration. It is a total reconnection to I remember, and that is all. All the rest only encumbers you. All the rest, even the unconscious, only resists, through an unconscious survival mechanism of the ego, of consciousness itself, in order to prevent you from finding yourself again. You have nothing to banish, nothing to oppose, you have only to recognize yourself, and there is nothing simpler, from the moment there are no more projected beliefs, even in Nibiru. Of course all the signs are there on the stage of the world. The lies, the falsification, the travesty, the simulacrum of the sacred, must not divert you, even if you look at them, must not draw you toward anything other than what you are. If you accept this, you have no effort to make. As long as you believe you must make an effort, you are not there. Here at the heart, in silence, in acceptance, something resists. But let me reassure you, the more the chaos of the world, the more the chaos of your life amplifies in one way or another, as it will for some of us in the other dimensions, the more it will bring us to the cessation of resistance, and to entering into resilience, into acceptance, not into submission, but truly into the discovery of the truth. No cosmic lie about the other dimensions will be able to hold up either, of course. You know that the Earth is a meeting place of the Alpha and the Omega. Of course, many events, many appointments, will occur, not only war, but also the extraterrestrials, and also all the lies. I have already spoken of it at length, but all of this you may look at, only do not be captive to what you look at. In the same way, do not be captive to your experiences, to your feelings, to your disorders, or even to your joy, and even to your state of agape. Because agape does come from somewhere, joy does come from somewhere, the love, the light that you are come from somewhere, and that somewhere is you, outside of time, outside of space, outside of history. This is what you must, not resolve, but accept, and remember too the words of Biddy, understanding cannot be intellectual. Understanding cannot even be mystical. Nor can it be vibratory. Understanding comes only from the lived experience of silence, there where there is no more friction, there where there is no more resistance, not to what is on the theater stage or on the stage of your history, but in relation to the real, in relation to silence. If you wish to find yourself again, and you cannot not meet yourself, and if you do not wish to live through unpleasantness, accept, and above all be present in what life sets before you, in what life asks you to carry out at this moment. Be attentive to silence, be attentive to your body whatever it tells you, be attentive to all that makes up the daily round of your life. It does not happen elsewhere, it happens solely in the daily round of your life. Why do you refuse this thing? Why do you want that other thing? That is resistance. Remember, understanding comes from the lived experience of the great silence, of the real, of the white paradise, of the natural state, of the real state, never from an understanding. It is simply the lived experience that triggers true understanding, which is absolutely not mental, and still less bound to your consciousness or your unconscious, or your superconsciousness, or your subconscious. These are games that continue, I would say in spite of you, on the stage of the dream, because you cannot be anywhere other than where you are, at the age you are, with the illnesses and the joys you have. It is exactly, as I have also very often repeated to you, what you wrote in your scenario. No one imposed anything on you, neither the archons, nor God, nor the religions. But we could not know it and live it before the first descents of the triple radiation since 1984, and you see, that is 42 years now, a progression that unfolded slowly at first. Remember, for the old ones, the celestial wedding, the time it took to activate a new body, the new chakras, and to live certain states of consciousness. Today, all of that is archaic, it belongs to history. I am willing to grant that for some of you it may still be a crutch, but do not make of it an end. The end is beyond anything that any of us can imagine, here as elsewhere. The end is to understand that there is neither beginning nor end, and that everything that has appeared will disappear. Biddy said it in every possible way. Everything that passes cannot be true. Only what you are is true, and what you are bears no attribute of love, light, karma. In the beginning, we had said, there were laws in the universe, action, reaction, and grace in action. That still belong to history. There is no more law except the law of the real. The fact of remembering and of understanding through the lived experience of silence, of non-resistance, of acceptance, of humility, of simplicity on the way of childhood. At that moment, whatever the problems of the world, whatever the problems of your life, you will have the understanding of them. I did not say the solution, I said indeed the understanding. That is far more important than hoping for a solution for your body, for consciousness, or for some future, because it is already there. Do not look for a date. No one knows the date, even though the events are all present in your scenario, as in the scenario of the whole of creation, as Biddy would say, in all the universes, in all the multiverses, and in all the dimensions. No one can picture what is coming, you can only live it, and it is open to you, and it is open to us, there, now, in this moment, and not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, not when Nibiru is here, not when the chaos of the world, and of course the dramatic events of the human stage, the war of all against all, is here. You have nothing to dread, that too must be accepted. Even if it is the departure of your body, even if it is a divorce, even if you win the lottery, even if you have no money, it is of no importance whatsoever before the real and before what you are. Nothing can stand except what you are. The universe will disappear and, as Biddy said, you will still be there, not in this body perhaps, and certainly not, in fact, but in the real, there where there is neither time, nor space, nor consciousness, nor future, nor past. There, ultimately, where all of us, without exception, have always been. It is the game of creation, the game, I would say in modern language, of the simulation, which made you believe, and made us believe, that we were pilgrims of eternity, even if that is true. But today the pilgrimage must cease, because that is what you wrote, that is what we wrote for that time, for that space, here in the time zero of the earth, nowhere else, yet it does not concern the earth, it concerns the whole of the dream, the whole of creation, the whole of the dimensions. It is quite obviously an equally important moment in the illusion of time. This omega moment, which is nothing other than the reconnection to the alpha. In fact, there is no distance, there is no path from the alpha to the omega, just as there is no path from the omega to the alpha, since the alpha and the omega resolve themselves here and now in time zero, at the heart of the heart as we used to say, not only in the ascensional crown of the heart or in the expansion of consciousness, but really and concretely, as Biddy said, in the cessation of the perfidy of consciousness. You are the A-consciousness, he proclaimed year after year, and that is what you recover in silence, in acceptance, but at every level. Not only in your body, in your life, but for the whole of creation. It is simply the true grace, it is far more than a state of grace, it is grace in itself, the one we gave ourselves, the one we promised ourselves to recover. Many years ago, the Source spoke of the oath in the promise. Just as the Archangel Uriel spoke of the turning around, just as the Archangel Michael spoke of purification. But forget the names, forget the teachings, it is in silence and in the forgetting of history that you realize you were never born, that you never appeared, and that you never disappear. Not in this body, not in this history, and yet within this body, and yet within this history that you are living at this very moment. There is nothing to regret, there is nothing to celebrate. Obviously, it will be a great wedding. We began with the celestial weddings many years ago now. Perhaps you remember, from 2008 to 2012, and then other weddings, the cosmic weddings, and then, afterward, the revelation of the cosmic lie, of the planetary lie. Today is the hour of the resolution of the lie of form, of the lie of consciousness, and not only of the planetary and cosmic lie. But you are not the lie. You wrote the lie, we wrote it, not as an ordeal, but indeed as a form of experience of ourselves, in order to experience all that it was possible to experience, all that it was possible to confront. But today, what you experience, what perhaps confronts you, is linked solely to the last residues of beliefs, to the last residues of your consciousness, of your history, but also, of course, of the whole of creation. Joy is there, peace is there, not outside, not in your body, even though you are in this body, but in the very place where there is only what the ego calls the void, the nothingness. Today, even the scientists understand that all consciousness arises from the void. In reality, you are not consciousness. In reality, you are the architect of the void, of geometry, of mathematics, of the stories, of the cycles, of the Mahapralayas as much as of your own life. But all of this must end, as you know, in a nightmare, in an apotheosis of joy. And without the nightmare, there is no joy. So accept, do not resist, be humble, be gentle with yourselves and with all that unfolds in this world. You have the right to lucidity, you have the right to the understanding of the mechanisms of the dream, and also to the understanding of the lies, whatever they may be, but you are none of that. You are simply the occasion to reveal this I remember, this natural state prior to consciousness, which is beyond all states and, of course, independent of consciousness as of all experience. That is what I had to say to you. I hope to have the occasion soon to find you again, perhaps in a smaller gathering, for an intimate meeting from heart to heart, above all with the one who will accompany you perhaps most directly, who is of course the star, who is Ma Ananda, she who incarnated the totality of the real, but which today you too incarnate, of course, from the moment you no longer believe in anything other than what you are, whether you know it or not. These are the few words I had to say to you. I will certainly return during the summer, at an opportune moment in your discovery of yourselves. Allow me, dear incarnate brothers and sisters, to bring you all my love, all my blessings, all my understanding for what you have, and what we too have, to live, to pass through, to understand, in this great silence of the real. And I say to you, until very soon. Translated from French to English via AI. Original French channeling by Jean-Luc Ayoun. From website apotheos.live. https://apotheose.live